केसरिया परम अवोरी पधारो हरे
Welcome to the inauguration of the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol, from the Diggi Palace in Jaipur, Rajasthan. It is now my pleasure to welcome Managing Director, Teamwork Arts, and producer of the Jaipur Literature Festival, Sanjoy Roy.
Why is it important for us to continue to fight to do something like the Jaipur Literature Festival or any of the arts festivals we continue to do day in and day out, despite the fact that we are so limited with resources and there's no real funding left for artists and artisans? It's because we feel that the arts is reflective of mankind's soul. That soul which is in many ways today, and not just today, even in the past, been mortgaged and been taken over by the tsunami of hatred and the tsunami of a sense of this is my way or the highway. The arts are able to project that many truths can sit together. They're not in opposition to each other. If those of you who remember Rashomon, the play later made into a film by Kurosawa, each of the people in that film and the play looked at the same incident from different points of view. So did that make for one point of view being a false narrative, or did it make for one point of view being the only narrative? No. That's what literature does. And that's what translations do from across the world. It brings us stories of love and life and battle and challenges, of humanity, of success, and from different parts, revealing identities, nuances, languages, food, culture, traditions, everything that makes for we as a people. In our quest for GDP growth, in our quest for stock exchanges booming, we forget that the essence of humanity lies in culture, in tradition, in identity. When people migrate, sometimes not because they wish to migrate, but because they're trying to save their lives, and they move from one place in really difficult circumstances to countries that welcome them in Europe and in America, etc., they take with them that slice of their world, their culture, their dance, their music. And so what does it do to the culture that they're taking this to? Should it threaten that majority culture? No. It only enriches the world that we live in. A special thank you to all our wonderful supporters. You do realize that in these times, I remember right in the beginning in a task force that I was part of for COVID, I was asked by a very senior member of government and a bureaucrat, so why do artists need money? Sanjoy, you keep talking about artists needing money. Why do artists need money? Why don't you tell the artists to contribute to our fund? And I had to say to them, what is this world of the arts? The ragi in the Gurdwara to the Kathak performer, the pandal maker, all of this that you see around us, the aesthetics of it, all of this is part of the creative industry. And if artists and artisans aren't able to sell their wares or aren't able to perform, as you saw them this morning, well, they don't eat. They don't have access to financial services. So to our supporters, thank you so much. Thank you for enabling us to create these platforms and bringing people together. So on that happy note, welcome to the Jaipur Literature Festival in its 14th year. A 14th year which has allowed us to re-engage with people, not just here, but across the world. I'm going to invite Namita Gokhale, co-founder and co-festival director, to come and say a few words, tell you about the program.
मैं हमेशा आदतन हिंदी से शुरू करती हूँ। आज हिंदी बोलने वाले यहाँ कम हैं, तभी भी कुछ शब्द मैं हिंदी में कहूँगी। मैं आज सबका स्वागत करती हूँ। हर साल जयपुर के साहित्योत्सव में पहले मैं ये पंक्तियाँ याद करती हूँ, सुनाती हूँ। ये हैं, सरस्वती के भंडार की बड़ी अपूरब बात, ज्यों बाँटे त्यों त्यों बढ़े, बिन बाँटे घट जात. Now, for those of you who don't understand Hindi, I quoted some lines which say, knowledge, as represented by the goddess Saraswati, is the only treasure which grows by sharing. It can be shared and enhanced by the more people who partake of it. A very warm welcome to all of you as we celebrate the 14th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, and we embark on a journey of books and ideas. The festival will be mostly virtual, but today we have the joys of companionship as we share our stories with each other. Storytellers change, stories don't. The Epic of Gilgamesh was written on stone tablets. The orality of our great epics was transcribed to palm leaf manuscripts. In our new and changing times, the digital dreamscape brings us voice and text and image and enhanced reality. But the stories remain the same, with the storyteller as the custodian of our collective memories. We at the Jaipur Literature Festival believe in and celebrate the word. Our virtual editions could be called a living library, or indeed a library of life. It has been an exciting challenge to put this edition together, and it will resonate around the world, giving us a glimpse of so many diverging, so many converging worlds. From Being Indian, the Individual and the Civilization with Pawan K. Verma and Saurabh Dwivedi, to a session on the tragic Bangla poet Michael Madhusudan Dutt and the play Dr. Malishri Lal and I have written on his life. From Enter Stage Right, the Alkazi Padamsi family memoir, to Vikas Swaroop on his novel Six Suspects, we will keep you enthralled. The Norwegian ambassador tells us of the landscape of books, as does the Australian ambassador just now after this. And Kishwar Desai tomorrow will speak of the legendary actress Devika Rani and a provocatively titled session called The Longest Kiss. Wajahat Habibullah invokes memory and discusses his long innings at the bureaucracy. We bring you Mohiniyattam, its art and aesthetics. Mahmood Farooqi pays tribute to the late S.R. Farooqi and his posthumously published novel, Kabze-Zama, before we conclude with Harsh Mandar on the pandemic and the battle for security and rights of India's poor and underprivileged. Our digital outreach has opened up new universes of possibility. I'm excited at having the Italian astrophysicist and writer Carlo Rovelli in conversation with Professor Priyamvada Natarajan on a session called Nagarjun, Sunyata and Stardust, all the way from Italy. Winner of the 2020 Booker Prize, Douglas Stewart, speaks of his award-winning debut novel. We discuss and we rediscover Emperor Ashoka's ancient edicts through music with T.M. Krishna. We present all the varied languages of India, the 21 languages, in a program designed with the Sahitya Academy titled Sahitya Swarmala. Stellar Hindi writers like Chitra Mudgal and Alka Saraogi tell us of their new books. S. Harish, the author of the 2020 JCB Prize-winning novel, The Malayalam Moustache, will join us, as will others from the wonderful JCB shortlist. There is so much more to experience and reflect upon, from Gulabo Sapera and the Dance of the Serpents to the science, art, and philosophy of Indian food, from the ever-eloquent Shashi Tharoor to Keshav Desaraju on MS Subbalakshmi. Shekhar Pathak and Ramchandra Guha tell us of the people's history of the Chipko movement. In Brown Baby, British writer Nikesh Shukla explores shifting ideas of home. Bill Gates joins us, as does Priyanka Chopra, as she speaks of her inspirational new book, Unfinished. How thrilling to have Mark Haddon, Noam Chomsky, Jonathan Safran Foer, Robert McFarlane, Colm Tobin, Annie Proulx, Craig Brown, Colum McCann, Camilla Townsend, Peter Frankopan, Ben McIntyre, Vincent Brown, Hermione Lee, Richard Eaton, and Anish Kapoor. Not to mention John Micklethwaite of Bloomberg, Adam Gopnik, Patrick Radden Keefe, and Alex Ross of The New Yorker, Harvard superstars like Michael Sandel, Maya Jasanoff, Michael Puett, and Homi Bhabha. I could go on and on and on, but the entire program is online. A sampler of these treats will be presented over the weekend for you. Do please join us today and tomorrow, and then over the next 2 weekends to share in these joys and to partake of these delights. Thank you.
Thank you, Namita. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival, William Dalrymple.
Hello and welcome to the Jaipur Literature Festival, our first online edition. My name is William Dalrymple. I am one of the co-founders and co-directors of the festival. And it has been an odd silver lining in what has obviously been a very grim and difficult year for many of us, that being online, we have now a wider and maybe grander range of speakers than we've ever had, from Nobel Prize winners, Booker winners, Pulitzer winners, half the humanities faculty at Harvard. They're all here. So welcome to what will be a spectacular few days. As everyone knows, it's difficult now in India. We have a neutral space here to talk books, literature, and ideas. And we're very lucky to have this space. Never has it been more valuable than now. So enjoy what's coming in the next few days, and please do what you can to support us. These are hard times and we need your support now.
Thank you, William. Please welcome Director General ICCR, Shri Dinesh Patnaik.
It is with great pleasure that I've heard that the 14th edition of the Jaipur Literary Festival is going to be held soon, that too online. In a time like COVID, it gives me great happiness that we are being able to hold the 14th edition of the Jaipur Literary Festival. Albert Einstein used to say that there are two kinds of infinites in this world. One is the universe, which is infinite, and the other is human stupidity. And he went on to say he is not so sure about the universe. But the whole point is human stupidity has been kept at abeyance by the knowledge that we have garnered. Knowledge has empowered us, made us stronger, made us build, made us do things which we never thought was possible. But knowledge is of no use unless it was based on ideas. The whole society around us, the system that we have built, is built on ideas. Ideas which are stronger than even the power of the atom that we have harnessed. And ideas are of no use unless there are opinions, unless people express themselves, unless there's a variety of ways that you can talk to each other. Ideas germinate when people have opinions, when people are free to talk, to discuss, to debate. And this is what Jaipur Literary Festival brings together. A forum where people with diverse opinions, various ideas, brilliant ideas, different social strata, different political thought, different ideologies all come together to discuss what is good in the world, what we need to do better, what do we need to leave behind, what are the main trending things that are happening in the world, what are the different social, cultural things which are evolving, how is the internet changing the world. All these wonderful things that we sit down and discuss during the Jaipur Literary Festival for the last 13 editions will again be there with us. I can only say that this is probably the greatest literary festival in the world. And I'm delighted that it is having in its 14th edition. I'm looking forward to participating in it, in meeting, in listening, in discussing, in debating, and overall in having a great time. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
My name is Ramtap Singh Diggi. This is my incredible wife Jyotika Diggi. And we are just now standing in Darbar Hall, which was built by my forefathers in the 1850s. Where we are, the land on which this Darbar Hall is built was given to us when Maharaj Jai Singh first was building the city of Jaipur. And he called all of us to come and build this city with him. And in 1728, this piece of land was given to our family, and it's been in our family ever since. And this is where, incidentally, the first session of the Jaipur Literature Festival was held in 14, 15 years ago. So that is where everything began. That's why this Darbar Hall is so symbolic to us, to the Jaipur Literature Festival, and to the rest of the world and all of you people who come and see this.
We hope to see everybody here, not just next year, but for many, many more years after that. And we hope to see much more of the younger generation reading, writing, and coming up with the written word.
Thank you, Ram Pratap Singh Diggi and Jyotika Kumari Diggi. It's an honor to invite Dr. D Kalla, Honorable Minister of Art, Literature, Culture, Archaeology, Energy, Public Health, Engineering and Groundwater, Government of Rajasthan, to open the festival.
A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries, speakers, and the global audience who have joined online at the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival. The festival also now known as one of the greatest literary shows on earth, has been a melting pot of ideas. The effect of COVID-19 has adversely impacted lives of thousands across the world, even including artists in Rajasthan. It is heartening to see that in spite of all the difficulties, the festival and Sanjoy's team has maintained its core values of a democratic and non-aligned platform. Each year, the JLF brings together a diverse mix of the world's greatest writers, thinkers, humanitarians, politicians, business leaders, sports people, and entertainers on one stage. Om Sena Bhavatu, Seno Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavahe, Tejasvinam Avdhit Mastu, Ma Vidyusamahe, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May God protect us, nourish us, and may we work together with energy and vigor. May our study be enlightening and not give rise to hostility and disputes. Jai Hind.
कहाँ जा रहे हैं हम?
आपका बेटा बड़ा हो गया पापा, और अब हमारा घर भी।
Get quick and easy home loans from Bank of Baroda for your dream home. Please fasten your seat belt. Quick and easy education loans from Bank of Baroda. Power your dreams today.
For those of you joining us right now, welcome back to the keynote session of the Jaipur Literature Festival 2021, supported by the Bank of Baroda. It is our pleasure to present today The Art of Innovation, Ian Blatchford and Tilly Blyth in conversation. Throughout history, artists and scientists have been bound together by a complex thread born out of the desire to experiment, taking inspiration from each other's disciplines, but working from very different perspectives. This session, featuring Sir Ian Blatchford and Tilly Blyth, co-authors of the book The Art of Innovation, From Enlightenment to Dark Matter, will discuss how the ingenuity of science and technology has fed the artistic imagination and thus affected innovation, a much-needed key aspect in today's world. Sir Ian Blatchford was appointed Director and Chief Executive of the Science Museum Group from November 2010 and combined this with the role of Director of the Science Museum from December 2010. Tilly Blyth co-presented a landmark 20-part radio series with the BBC on the art of innovation, including a book and an exhibition that looks at the shared cultures of art and science over the past 250 years. She is the head of collections and principal curator at the Science Museum in London, where she is responsible for a curatorial team that have developed award-winning galleries and exhibitions on subjects as diverse as information age, mathematics, robots, cosmonauts, the Russian space story, and illuminating India, 500 years of science and technology. Please do remember to comment by typing it into the comment section below. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote address at the 2021 Jaipur Literature Festival, all the way to Diggy Palace. The Art of Innovation, Ian Blatchford and Tilly Blyth in conversation.
In this series, I'll be drawing on some key objects from the Science Museum Group collections.
And as Director of the Science Museum, I'll be exploring major artworks as we examine the role of art as observer, critic, and friend to science. Because with each new technological advance, artists have sought to keep step with their own new ways of seeing.
You join me in a beautifully romantic spot with the River Severn peacefully winding through the valley, the trees and houses dotted on either side of the banks. Today, the scene is a vision of calm and tranquility, but it's not always been so. Coalbrookdale was once the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, where the guts of the earth were spewing out smoke and fire across the landscape. From the 18th century, this was the centre for iron production. Famously known for the construction of the world's first iron bridge, the area quickly became an industrial marvel. The combination of English countryside with new industrial wonder meant that the area held a particular fascination for artists, as Coalbrookdale conspired to produce both a picturesque and sublime scene.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's great to be with you, even if only virtually. I look forward, hopefully next year, to being with you in India. I am indeed Ian Blatchford, Director of the Science Museum and Chief Executive of the Science Museum Group, which is the largest group of science museums in the world. Also, for the purposes of this book and this talk, I have an unusual background because I'm not a scientist, even though I run the Science Museum. I used to be Deputy Director of the Victoria and Albert Museum. So in fact, I'm an art historian running the Science Museum, which I hope is rather intriguing. And I'm joined this morning by Dr. Tilly Blyth, who's Head of Collections and Principal Curator at the Science Museum, who's a wonderful colleague who worked on the project with me. And we're talking about The Art of Innovation, that was a landmark 20-part BBC series, first broadcast in the winter of 2019, that also became a book and an exhibition. And of course, the broadcasts are still available on BBC Sounds. And I will refer to some elements of those broadcasts as I'm talking to you. So the inspiration for the book came partly from my personal passion for both art and science, and also Tilly's great interest in science as a cultural phenomenon. But of course, we were inspired. The launchpad, if you like, for the project was the fact that we have the largest, and if I may say immodestly, the greatest science collection in the world. We have 7 million objects, and they have their origins in what I think of as the world's first expo, which of course was the Great Exhibition of 1851. Not only enormously successful with visitors, but the profits of which helped found the South Kensington Museum in 1851 and build its great collection. And right from the inception, that museum did not make a split between art and science. It saw it all as relevant to human progress. In fact, it described its displays as being the industrial arts and decorative arts. However, the museum did in fact split in two in 1909, and one half became the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the other half was the Science Museum, which I now run. But I suppose the core idea that we're trying to look at in this book is not the division and split, but in fact the unity between these different disciplines. And it's very easy to see art and science as fundamentally different. So people often talk of science as being about the rational and the empirical, and art as being about emotion and impulsiveness. And in fact, this is reinforced by one of the most famous, some might think most notorious lectures about culture ever, by C.P. Snow in 1959. C.P. Snow, a great novelist, civil servant, and also scientist, who felt that actually the culture of art and science had driven themselves far apart, and actually was not optimistic that they might be united again. And I think one of the things I hope that we explain in the book is that for most of the history of art and science, people did not see it that way. We start, as Tilly will talk later, with an object from 1766. And for century after century, an intelligent man or woman did not make any distinction between art and science. It was simply knowledge, anything that a cultured and civilized person would enjoy with relish. And it's much more a modern phenomenon that we have this great anxiety. And although artists and scientists seem to work in very different contexts, having met so many great people from both sides of the professions over the years, what I'm struck by is that actually they're united by asking enduring questions, and boundless curiosity about the world around them, and also seeking to have an impact on humanity and make progress in the world. In fact, a desire for change, also imagination, creativity, these are great qualities that unite art and science rather than divide. I thought I would say something also about a particular pleasure for being part of the Jaipur Festival, because India is very important in the way the Science Museum looks at the world. I should say from the outset that the Art of Innovation, because it's based in our collections, has of course a strong bias towards Western and European collections, but we know that's just a historical accident. And in 2017 and 18, we mounted an exhibition that I was very proud of, called 5,000 Years of Indian History. Rather ambitious, I think you might agree, in terms of its scope. And we included some wonderful objects from great Indian scientific figures in that exhibition. We had J.C. Bose's early 20th century crescograph, which was designed to observe plant growth at a magnification of 10,000 times, and also C.V. Raman's spectrometer, which was used to explore the scattering of light on materials. And what's very striking about the work of both these men is that the imagination and creativity that they displayed was something that would be perhaps associated with an artist, but actually is true of great scientists as well. In this session, I'm going to speak about a couple of the episodes, and Tilly will talk about three other episodes that were part of innovation. And so let me start, first of all, with an episode in the book and also in the radio series called Tracking Progress, Turner and the Railways. And one of the things we wanted to reflect on is one of the greatest of all human inventions was the invention of the railways. Its impact is absolutely enormous. And the inspiration we took for that episode was, in fact, one of my favorite paintings. In fact, one of the most popular and iconic paintings in the world, which is Rain, Steam and Speed, the Great Western Railway, 1844, by J.M.W. Turner. And if you hear the podcast, you will know that I have the particular joy of being alone with that great painting in the National Gallery early one morning. Normally it's surrounded by millions of people and lots of very, very loud language students talking loudly when you're trying to enjoy the art. But to absorb the picture alone was really wonderful. And the reason the picture is so extraordinary is because of when it was painted and also the mindset of Turner. So the year before the painting, in 1843, 2,000 railway bills had passed through the British Parliament, and there was a huge mania for railways. Suddenly, the whole landscape and economy of Britain was changing. And it's extraordinary to think as well that in the middle of the painting is the Firefly locomotive that is pulling the train over the Maidenhead Bridge. And the passengers on that train were traveling at 60 miles per hour, which sounds pretty uninteresting to our modern minds. But actually, at that moment, they were traveling faster than any other human had traveled before. It's an extraordinary idea. And so what is captured in the painting is the exuberance and excitement, but also the danger of this incredible moment. On the positive side was the excitement reflected in the name of the locomotive, Firefly, which was designed by the chief engineer, Daniel Gooch. And in fact, it celebrates speed. So other locomotives were called Achilles, Arrow, Dart, Pegasus. But also it was a time of great ambiguity. There were many great figures in politics and culture who were deeply disturbed by the railways. They felt it was destroying the countryside, and the perfect fantasy of England as this great pastoral paradise was being destroyed. Turner was also interesting because actually, although he was a member of the Royal Academy, he also had great friendships with members of the Royal Society, the world's greatest scientific institute, and rubbed shoulders with them all the time. He had an unstoppable interest in technology. And so in his mind, he made no distinction between art and science. And then the second episode I want to mention briefly is about an episode called Reaching for the Moon, The Truth About Photography. It's about an extraordinary engineer called James Naismith. Now, James Naismith was a brilliant young engineer who made so much money from an invention called the steam-powered hammer that he retired in his early middle age and devoted his life to making detailed observations of the moon from his telescope. And using these detailed observations in the middle of the 19th century, he realized that actually with a bit of imagination, artistic imagination, he could create 3D representations of the moon's surface by using plaster models. And these models were so extraordinary in their day and admired by scientists that actually, if you read the way he describes them and the way he photographed them in a book in 1874, and you then compare them with actually the Apollo 8 mission, when particularly astronaut Jeff Lovell first looked at the surface of the moon and in fact described the surface of the moon as looking like a plaster of Paris model. And so it's extraordinary that actually Naismith, having none of the modern technology, was with a leap of imagination able to imagine, as it turned out very accurately, what the moon might look like. And the thing that's interesting about Naismith is that actually in many ways it reminds us that so much of our view of the cosmos is also about a little bit of artistic license. So when we see images of planets in the cosmos, in many cases, they're not purely objective images because people have created computer-generated pictures using composite digital resources. So many of the pictures we think we see on television or on the internet are in fact contrived but in a scientific way. And so it's a wonderful way, in Naismith's case, of showing how an artistic technique became very relevant to something that would appear to be entirely different, which is pure scientific objectivity. So those are just two examples of some of the themes we illustrate. And I hope it also points out that just with the examples of Turner and Naismith, there are some wonderful, eccentric, maverick people. And surely the thing that unites art and science is all progress, in the great words of George Bernard Shaw, is made by unreasonable men. Thank you.
And before I start, I just really wanted to extend my thanks to you and to William Dalrymple and of course all the organisers of the Jaipur Literary Festival. When I attended last year, it was absolutely my highlight of 2020, which of course isn't saying that much given the year we've all had, but it was quite unlike any literary festival I've been to before. It's just that engagement of young people with new ideas that was really exciting. So I really can't wait for a time that we can all be back together and attend again in person. And as Ian has introduced, The Art of Innovation is a book about the power of the imagination in both understanding our world and exploring what's possible. So we look at this relationship between artists and scientists through the lens of 20 discrete stories. But in the book, we also set these within these 3 distinct periods. And I just wanted to quickly cover that because I think they're quite interesting and help us to think about the relationship. So the first is this age of romance, starting from the age of Enlightenment right through until the 18th century. And this was really a time when debate about the arts and natural philosophy was really loud and energetic. Artists and natural philosophers, or what we would call scientists today, they used imagination and their artistic skills to really reflect on the world that surrounded them. And they observed nature and pursued new ideas about the rationality of the universe. And at this point, science wasn't some kind of dry academic endeavor. It was a really exciting exploration that could be communicated through dramatic talks, vibrant discussion, even spectacular theatre. Then we move through to this age of enthusiasm, as we call it, which is really from the second half of the 19th century to around the First World War. And that brought with it new instruments, novel tools, and of course, new ways of understanding and seeing the world. So these new scientific devices meant we could start to measure the world with increasing accuracy. And we began to see things that weren't previously knowable. So things like electrons, electromagnetic waves, radioactivity. And through these developments came the camera. And with that, we began to be able to freeze time. And as Ian's discussed with the story of James Naismith, in doing so, that was, it really helped us to think about what was real. But of course, what was real became even less clear to us. And then finally, we talk about an age of ambivalence from the Second World War to the current day. And it's a time of contrast, of jarring juxtapositions and persistent uncertainty. So on the one hand, you have science and technology that have brought us great wealth and expanded consumer choice. But of course, those benefits haven't always been globally distributed to all of us. And the growth has come, we now know, at a massive environmental price. And with the birth of computers, we can gather immense quantities of data, but that can also be overwhelming, forcing us to rely on computer models, approximations, algorithms, and of course, as Ian said, always human judgment in their interpretation. So having just set out those 3 periods, I'd like to go back to the age of romance, when there wasn't this division between the 2 cultures, as we see so strikingly between artists and scientists today. Go back to a time where there was the study of nature and the universe by natural philosophers, and that those ideas were discussed and debated in coffee shops, in lecture halls, and they were presented to people with wonderful images like the painting I'm in front of. So you can see just behind me over my shoulder. This is a painting by one of my favorite painters of all time, a man called Joseph Wright of Derby. And it's called A Philosopher Giving That Lecture on the Orrery. And it was painted in 1766, and it's one of the jewels of Derby Museum and Art Gallery. And we refer to this painting in the first chapter of our book called The Scientific Sublime, From Darkness Comes Knowledge. It's a vast painting, as you can probably see. It's about 2 meters across, And it shows this philosopher, this scientist, wearing a red gown, and he's almost like a god. He's someone, I think, probably looks a little bit like Sir Isaac Newton. And he's standing in front of this orrery, a scientific instrument, which was used for explaining the movement of the planets around the sun. And this instrument might look very old to us today, but of course, at the time of painting it, this was the height of modernity. And clustered around it are children, men and women. You can probably just about make out a man who's taking some notes with very great intent. And there's two children who look almost as if they're about to start giggling. And this wonderful light that's falling on all of their faces, this light of scientific knowledge, and it's given by this imagined sun at the center of the orrery. And it gives you a real sense that science is for everyone. And of course, at this time, science was for everyone. You know, there were great popularizers of science, such as the science communicator and lecturer, James Ferguson. He would travel around Britain explaining astronomical science and combining that with a religious understanding of the cosmos. But it's important that we understand that, I guess, at this time, Ferguson, his work wasn't about trying to undermine religion. It was about explaining God's creation. So he didn't want scientific knowledge to replace religion, but he wanted it to reveal the order that God had produced. So in 1756, he wrote a really popular science book, and it was rather wonderfully called Astronomy Explained upon Sir Isaac Newton's Principles, Made Easy for Those Who Have Not Studied Mathematics. So a book for everyone. And this was, of course, a bestseller. Bringing all sorts of people to attend his lively talks. And we know that Ferguson visited Derby in July 1762, and we think it's really highly likely that the painter Joseph Wright would have seen one of his lectures, and he may have even been enthused to paint his picture as a result. Now, the second story I want to just introduce to you is called Observing the Air, and it's about John Constable and his clouds. So if we move forward to the 19th century, another of our stories looks at this time when natural philosophers were trying to understand the universe and to find knowledge that was rational, that was accurate, and that was universal. And of course, what did they do? They did what we all do. They looked up at the skies. And these clouds had inspired artists and poets for millennia. But clouds had also proved really wonderfully elusive to categorization with their morphing shapes that endlessly change. That is until the work of one man, Luke Howard, who we now refer to as the namer of the clouds. And it was Howard, who was a London pharmacist and just an amateur weather watcher, but he spent many, many years studying the atmosphere, and he took these very detailed measurements of the changes in the atmospheric pressure and rain readings. And we have many of the instruments that he used in the Science Museum's collections. But he also did these rather wonderful detailed studies of the skies, and his watercolors and drawings reflect this classification system that he developed. And they're also in the Science Museum collection on loan to us from the Royal Meteorological Society. So his paintings, these weren't only records of what he observed, but they were objects of persuasion. You know, he used these as tools to convince other people of his ideas and of the value of classification system. And in 1802, as part of this act of persuasion, he presented an essay called On the Modification of Clouds to the Askesian Society, which was a scientific debating society in London. Howard's classification system gave a sense of permanence to these cloud formations, but it was rather wonderful because it also allowed this sense of transience and mutability in cloud types. And it was for this reason that it was a really fantastically powerful device. So he used Latin. The clouds were categorized according to Latin words. So he used the word cirrus, meaning Latin for the curl of hair, to look at wispy clouds, and then stratus, meaning layer, cumulus, meaning a heap, so a cloud that looked like a small heap, and then he combined all three into a nimbus for a rain cloud.
And it was, I think, really very clever of Howard to use Latin, as this really gave his system a sense of authority, and of course brought him respect within the scientific community. So it was much more likely to be picked up by others. And Howard's classification system and his own publications stimulated the imaginations of poets, such as Goethe and Shelley and Coleridge. It wasn't just scientists that grabbed hold of his ideas. And Goethe became so enamored by Howard's remarkable taxonomy that he even penned several tributes in his honor. And others, though, were concerned that this taxonomy would cause rigidity and order to thinking, and that, of course, that's quite contrary to the requirements of romanticism and poetry. But Luke Howard wasn't the only person that was fascinated by these ethereal collections of water that we see in the sky. And between 1821 and 1822, the artist John Constable took up what he called skying on Hampstead Heath. So he would set off daily on the heath, stomping about and studying the atmosphere. And he produced over 50 paintings on plein air in the outside, taking advantage of some wonderful new tools that he had, such as the easel and the paint box. And he would capture what he saw. He would capture the skies. And these intense studies of the clouds show his remarkable understanding of cloud movements and of structure. But he didn't only paint them, he also annotated the back of his pictures with the time and the date and the direction he was facing, sometimes the wind direction. Again, these are kind of actions that are all very similar to those we might expect a scientist to undertake. So we don't know that there was any direct link between Luke Howard or John Constable. We know that they were working at remarkably similar times. And we do know that Constable had a copy of Howard's essay in his book. So quite likely that he was very familiar with his work. But we also know that Constable saw his work as about an understanding as well as depicting nature. So in 1836, he described painting as a science, and he said it should be pursued as an inquiry into the laws of nature. So I like to think that he very much saw himself as working as a scientist as well. The final story I just wanted to touch on is imagining matter at the edge of the unknown. And this really brings us right up to the current day and these wonderful ideas in physics about dark matter and relativity. So Ian and I have talked a lot about art and science in the 18th and 19th centuries, but over half of the stories in the art of innovation are from the 20th century. So I wanted just to finish by bringing us up to date and looking at one of the most important scientists of the 20th century, and that is, of course, Albert Einstein. So Einstein's theory of general relativity was first put forward in 1915, and it still to this day remains one of the most important scientific theories of our time. And it suggests that gravity arises from the bending of space and time. But it wasn't a theory that was verified by observation until 1919, when it was shown that light curves because of the gravitational field of the sun. But the theory arose from Einstein's creative thinking, not from any empirical observations that he had made. So I think it's really fitting to end on a quote from Einstein in 1931, when he was reflecting on his theory of general relativity. And it sums up his attitude towards the relationship between creativity and science. And he said, "I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination, for imagination is more important than knowledge. The knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. It is, strictly speaking, a real factor in scientific research." So for me, if Einstein says it, it must be true, obviously. And I think whether you are an artist or a scientist, or I like to think of myself as a little bit of both, it's really the imagination that's at the heart of our ability to aspire to be better, or to understand and to dream. So I think that's a wonderful place to finish, and thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ian Blatchford and Tilly Blyth, for that absolutely brilliant session about the role of science and technology and how you need this to play out through the arts, bringing about innovation, especially in these times. Thank the Bank of Baroda for supporting the session and our celebration partner, Diageo. And thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. To remember, it's 10 days of incredible sessions which you have to watch and stay logged on to be able to do so. And in the event that you want to go somewhere else, you can watch the front lawn sessions, the Darbar lawn sessions. Of course, you can go and meet all our partners in the exhibition area. And should you want to buy a book, just go on to Amazon and book the book of the session. And of course, for a little bit of retail therapy, we also have Craft Fables. Go and check out all of the wonderful products that our artisans have been creating for you through the year. As you're aware, the cultural sector has been critically impacted by the pandemic, and while we at Teamwork have braced ourselves for this new normal, we have struggled to ensure that we can continue to bring you a free flow of knowledge and ideas. Do support us. We really need it. Contribute at the Teamwork Arts site. And we would love you to help in every which way possible, including tweeting by using the hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2021, and of course our Twitter and Instagram handles Jaipur Litfest. Festival is protected by Dettol. See you at the next session.
कहाँ जा रहे हैं हम?
आपका बेटा बड़ा हो गया पापा, और अब हमारा घर भी.
Get quick and easy home loans from Bank of Baroda for your dream home. Please fasten your seat belt. Quick and easy education loans from Bank of Baroda. Power your dreams today.